Hey, everybody, it's Patty Jobervolsky with Up Your Creative Genius. Today, I have really one of the brilliant thinkers of our time, Hoyin, who's the CEO of Remo, one of my favorite online platforms. So if you don't know what Remo is, first off, you got to go there and check it out, and then come back and listen to the podcast because it is incredible. So let me introduce him. He's a serial entrepreneur. His core passion is really helping businesses to grow with software tools. Now, he's worked with some big brands, Nike and Best Buy and Kaiser, before he developed Remo and got into this whole way of making creativity, authentic conversations, and meaningful connections for people in an environment, which is like a live conference room. It's amazing. And there's different floors. You can double click on people and go meet them. It's so cool. So thank you so much for taking time to be in the podcast. All right. So say hello.
Hey, Patty. Well, first off, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm super excited. I'm really looking forward to the podcast. So thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. So first off, tell us your story. Like, how did you get into doing this? I know you worked for big brands before this, but tell us a little bit about you growing up and then how you got into doing software development, et cetera.
Sure. I mean, when I grew up, like my dad was really into technology. Like he bought, those really, you know, MS-DOS, Windows 3.1, like really old school computers, and they weren't very user friendly. But back in the day, I was always really interested in technology, and my dad played like a really big role and influence on that. And so when I kind of grew up, like, and after growing up and just going to college, and I always wanted to, I was always interested in technology. And then I read a lot about businesses and startups, and prior to 2001, there's always, you've always started to hear about the dot-com and the dot-com boom and stuff like that. And so I've always was interested in doing something, but at that time, so I graduated like after the dot-com boom, but I just didn't know what to do after graduating. And so I did a lot of, I worked at a bank before. I did management consulting for a while, and then it slowly moved towards technology. So when I was consulting, I was helping like large brands like Nike and all of them, these Fortune 500 companies, figure out what they wanted to do with their data centers, their infrastructure, their routers, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And at that point in time is when I was started introduced to remote working. And because as a management consultant, like most of like my team members and everyone who I work with within my company and with a client, we're not always, we're flying everywhere, but we're also communicating through conference calls and everything. And so
yes, one of the most boring mediums in the world, the conference call, right?
Exactly. And that kind of already started to get me into what the challenges were about communication. And so when I started coming out on my own and developing my own ideas and trialing and erroring, one thing led to another, and it eventually kind of led to Remo. And I can absolutely share the story as well.
Well, that's fantastic. I want you to share that piece. So, you grew up in a family where technology was normal to investigate that. And I think that, that and the fact that you were solving a problem, right, that you were having, because honestly, I trained in that environment. So I would like write people's names on a Post-it note and I'd stick them in front of me. So I imagined that they were in the space, because otherwise, how would I remember who was there or be able to call on them by name? So I love that. So then where did you get the idea for Remo? And then how did you develop it?
Yeah, sure. So right after I left this sort of traditional corporate job, I started to like develop many different ideas, and I started developing remote teams as a way to be lean and a way to hire great people, and finding great people.
Right.
And so
that didn't have to leave their home. That didn't have to leave their home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, at that time, like I didn't really call it remote working. I mean, at the time I was just like, I'm just outsourcing or finding a contractor to kind of help
Right.
me, just do work. Like it wasn't, back in the day prior to 2019 or 2020, wasn't like remote work was a fringe trend really.
Right.
So I started many of my businesses like that. Some worked, some did. I ended up landing on developing a social media SaaS company that
Okay.
helped mostly Instagram people with Instagram accounts. There were like small businesses, a lot of like lifestyle businesses. They wanted to increase their engagement and get
Yeah.
more followers, and so my
Yeah.
software helped them do that. So with that, I had 25 people that worked for the company at that time, and it was something that I started to feel the strain in having
Yeah.
all 25 people work remotely and not be able to connect. And I actually lost a few people because I couldn't maintain a good relationship and connection with them
Mm.
and people who were living like halfway across the world.
Yeah.
And so I then started to at some point, I wanted to do something else. I wanted to change and do something bigger than
Just
the social
Instagram
media
posting. Yeah.
software. Yeah, I want to do something a little bit more bigger than that. And so I started to think about what were some of the challenges and what was a long-term trend that I wanted to go for. And I felt remote work is a long-term trend. Like
Yeah.
I believe that eventually, maybe 10 years or I don't know, maybe 5, 6 years from now,
Right.
from
Right.
2019, people would be like,
Right.
yeah, like okay, remote
Yeah.
work.
Then the
And
explosion happened, right? Then COVID.
yeah, little did I know that it was going to happen like the following year, you know. So and so when we first created, we were trying to create a virtual office. So it was
Right.
more for like productivity, like trying to replicate those hallway conversations where
Yes.
you would walk by someone and be like, hey, how's it going? Like, oh, how's your dog? How's your kid? And da 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 da. And when you worked
So the
virtually,
bonding, the
remote,
bonding
yeah,
experience, you wanted to, so that people were actually having a real relationship, but in a virtual
yeah,
world.
yeah. So it's like like the serendipity,
Yeah.
the chance, the luck of
Yeah.
meeting people.
Yes.
I think that's really important in life, and I can share a little bit more about that. But like with that serendipity, I think is really important for the human experience, for the human condition. And
Yes.
I felt that was really important to replicate. So we tried, we built it, we tried to sell it, and it was kind of like a classic, startup tragedy, because like I interviewed like 20 people, like 20 fully remote CEOs, and I asked them, what is your biggest challenge? And they all said, connecting with each other was the biggest challenge. So I was
Right.
like, great, I'm going to build that thing to help you to solve your top challenge.
Right.
I built it and went back to all of them, and they didn't buy.
Oh
They didn't buy
God.
it. So
Yes.
I built this virtual office. It was like a map. So, just to share it with your audience, like imagine you're looking at a Google map and there's you press on the button where like it shows you where you are. It's like this little circle, blue
Yes.
circle. Imagine zooming all the way into where you are, where you see yourself in a building. You zoom
Yes.
further in where you can see the chairs and the tables. And your
Yes.
circle is sitting on a chair.
Right.
But it's not just a circle. It's not just a circle. It's your face is on that circle.
Okay. So you
If
had
you
like
click
your
on a
own
different,
avatar. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, your own avatar. And if you clicked on a different table, your circle avatar would move to that table and you would see the video streams of the people on that table. So it kind of replicated like each table is kind of like its own conversation. So it
Yes.
replicated that kind of dynamic of how conversations actually flow in real life. So then we did that for virtual office. We then had the opportunity to basically sponsor this virtual summit. So it's just basically like what we call now these virtual conferences. It's like 3 days, 10,000 people went through it. And I said, hey, what about these virtual summits at the time? They were
Yeah.
pre-recorded. Okay, this is 2019.
Oh
They're
yeah. Yeah. Of course.
pre-recorded videos, and you would attend the event. You wouldn't meet a single person. All you get is a
No.
list of videos, and you just watch them one at a time.
Yeah. How
That's
boring is it? That's terrible. That's not what a conference really is about. Because the most fun is
so
when you go out on break and you have food and or you randomly move to another table because you want to meet people.
yeah, and so when we said, hey, you know what? Don't do that. let me like modify our product from a virtual office into a conference, change it, repackage it a little bit, same engine, but
Nice.
repackage it.
Yes.
And said, like let's just make it like a real conference, and people kind of go through it, and you can have live talks, and people can chat with each other, blah blah blah. And so after the conference, like it was so funny, we didn't sell a single virtual office, nothing.
Oh God.
It was like crickets.
Oh
And
my
and so
God.
like, but
It's so truly entrepreneurial experience right here, what you're talking about. Yes.
100%. It's like the
Yes.
typical like startup tragedy. And then so then we asked them like, hey, how's your experience? And they're like, oh my God, the experience was amazing. It was great. I can talk to people, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, great. So, we have this product. It's called virtual office. It's like, wait, what? No. I don't care about the virtual office. I want to host my event on
On that
Remo as a
platform. Yeah.
conference,
Yeah.
on,
On
on
that
Remo
platform.
conference
Yeah.
as a conference. And I was like,
Yeah.
but we're not a conference product. And then when people started saying it more to me, and I was like, okay, maybe we have something here. It was
Yeah.
literally night and day. The
Oh
way how
God.
we were the
Well, and then
conversations
you
were
had to
literally night and
pivot
day.
from this one product you had to this other product. So talk about that kind of a change between doing this office product, which you probably had pretty dialed in, to this other event platform. What happened then?
Yeah, I mean, because like one side of me was like, oh, I don't want to give up on the virtual office. I just started. It's been a few months. Like, have I tried enough?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I don't want to be too wishy-washy and jump around to too many different things. Do you know what I
Yes.
mean? Like,
Yes.
I want to make sure that I gave some good punches before I change it
Yes,
up a bit.
exactly.
And so I did some more testing. I sold a little bit more for about another 2 months, and then but I also did more testing with the conference side, and I talked to more people, and the traction kind of just kept on flowing. Like it just flowed downhill, whereas the other
Yes.
way was like uphill, and it
Uphill.
was just really
Yeah.
really tough.
Against the
That's
grain. But isn't that wild? Because wouldn't you think that in this world that we're living in now, you'd still want that office environment? That's what's crazy about it. So you did this other thing. And Remo became the thing that launched, really.
right. So Remo. So then eventually I pivoted because I
Right.
was like, why am I working so hard here when it feels so easy over here? So
Yes.
I was just like, I'm just going to go down the path of least resistance here. And
Yeah.
then I just decided to pivot. And when we started pivoting, the conversations became easier.
Yeah.
People to be honest, like every time when I talked to someone, they were happy and I was happy. And I
Yeah.
just felt, do I want to be depressed or do I want to be happy?
No,
You
you
know?
want to be happy.
So
Right.
so it felt right. I can't explain it. Like
Yeah.
it just felt right. People were saying great things about the product. I didn't know how to monetize it, but I just did a lot of testing and just worked with people a lot.
Yep.
And this was prior to the pandemic in 2019. By the end of 2019, remote work started
Yeah.
to really catch on. Like Silicon
Yeah.
Valley was starting to talk
Explode.
about it.
Yeah.
And so this is at the end of 2019 in Q4, and the timing was just impeccable for Silicon
Yeah.
Valley. And so
Yeah.
then when it came when the whole kind of tsunami came from the pandemic, we were just I guess in the right place at the right time, and so
Yeah.
we were able
Yeah.
to, yeah,
Well,
100%.
now you must have had a really slim staff at that point, right? And then
Yeah,
how that must have really exploded what you had to do and become in order to meet the need. How did you do that?
yeah. I mean, we had 6 people like in February, and then we were making only like $6,000 a month or something like that in like February. And then we broke even in April. And then like we just had so many leads. So like I remember just talking to people every single day. Every day was like I need a platform now. My event is next week. Like it was
Oh my
literally like
God.
everyone's hair was
Wow.
on fire.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um and and so I it was just a blur. It was just like I couldn't I was trying to sell as fast as I could, and people started coming in and working with us. And I was very lucky that we hired great people at the very beginning,
Yeah.
made some really lucky moves, and that really
Yeah.
just helped catapult us really, really far out for the rest of the year. So it was really it was very good timing and you know, glad I just met the right people to work with.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you talked about this, the concept of synchronicity. And, for me, that synchronicity happened for you when you realized, oh, the conference for 10,000 people was so much better of an opportunity. But you took
Right.
advantage of that. You still like played around with in the other space because you had invested so much time. And I think that's one of the things that is so true. We have our our things that we've birthed and we love them and they're
Yeah.
fantastic, but eventually we have to like, no, this thing is what's the thing that people really need. So how many employees do you have now?
About 100
Yeah,
right now.
I thought it must be at least that amount because, and how many events do you host on Remo?
Each day, it's like around about like the latest numbers is around about like 12,000 events a month.
Yeah. Okay. So if you're just, think about this from 10,000 to a year later, 2 years later, right? 12,000 in a month. That's insane. So but you've stabilized the platform in a lot of ways. There are new, always, what I love about the way that you've run Remo is that you always come on and talk about the features. You talk about what's new. You're always listening to your customer in such a great way. So what are you excited about? Because that's exciting to me that all became very
Yeah.
successful like that. But what's exciting to you?
So for me, like my whole goal has always been how do you create authentic conversations that build meaningful relationships, and that's been the mission that I've always had. And what excites me the most is being able to stretch the boundary of that continually. Like at the end of the day, Remo's, in my mind, is an experiential company. Like we do help businesses, but we do things that some things that businesses don't ask for. And so some ways we're kind of like a consumer product because consumer products, Steve Jobs was really famous, like saying like, don't listen to the customer. Like you have your own vision to create because the customers don't know what good looks like.
Yeah.
Um, and
And
I
would
would
you
say
say
like,
that's true? Is that true for Remo too?
this is kind of how I think it. The grand vision of what you're trying to build,
Yes.
that the customer won't know. They won't know, like they won't know that the iPhone is like the best way of how it should look like that core, like
Yes.
just innovation is that has to be from the company,
Yes.
from product. But the specifics of how they use it, whether they're using it in their lives, is it matching the problems that they're working with?
Yeah.
Those types of specific things,
Yeah.
those the customers have to tell you, and those are things that you must listen because those are the things that either make their job easier, or optimize certain parts of it, makes the journey, it makes the whole feeling, like the whole
Yes.
overall like journey better.
Yes.
um that's that part you kind of have to listen to them. And so it's a mixture of both, but the only way to be innovative in my mind is really from product and from the company itself.
Yeah.
Customers won't tell you they're like in a like this really really innovative kind of thing. They'll have some ideas, but not that those not necessarily
Yeah.
are the ideas that you may want to pursue. Like some of them yes, and some of them may not be.
Yeah. Now, what do you think in this whole process of creating Remo? What's been the most challenging for you?
To be honest, like I think the pandemic, I mean, it's a kind of weird thing to say, right? Because you would say, well, the pandemic must have helped you. I mean, yes, it has. But I think also the pandemic has also made it challenging for us as a company to figure out how to be, how to plan in a longer time span, and how
Oh,
to
yeah.
find how to find the new normal and to build a sustainable business. Because think about it, the pandemic is something that is not sustainable. right? We know
Right.
it will go away.
Yeah, they'll
So
revert back to some kind of hybrid event or right.
right, exactly.
And so
And
what would
so
that
for
look like
me,
for
it's
Remo, right?
exactly. And so for me, it looks like you are a ship going through a fog and you
Yeah.
see these lights, faint lights, and you see multiple lights. But which is the light that you need to steer towards?
Yeah.
You don't know.
Yeah.
It's not clear. And we're waiting for the fog to clear to
Yeah.
see what lies ahead. And when you see Omicron, when you see all these new things coming up, like
Yep.
it's prolonging the fog, where
Yeah.
really we just want the fog to clear as quick as possible.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yes, it did help us, but for long-term sustainability, Remo is extremely aligned
Yeah.
with everyone else in the world. It's not like,
Yeah.
we want the pandemic to continue so we can continue like, selling and all that kind of stuff. No, like that's just not realistic.
Yeah.
And so that to me is one of the hardest. It's actually honestly one of the hardest things.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's almost like you want to have the holodeck, right? So the holodeck, so that you can go in there, anybody could go in there and they could engage and play in a way that they could grab and use objects. And so somehow that VR quality, you've created this kind of, it's a three-dimensional because you actually are in there and you feel like you're in the space and you're engaging with people on your, by Zoom when you drop
Yeah.
into the space, and you can move around in there. You can go up and see vendors. You can do all kinds of things, right? But the main thing I think that is fascinating to me is that what will happen when things stabilize, because they will. And then
Right.
what will your brand look like then? I think, is that what's keeping you up at night?
Yeah, I mean, it's trying to know what that future new normal looks like. Yes,
Yeah.
I would say that is something that is on top of mind because we need the customer that we had during the pandemic that
Yep.
we had is a different customer after the pandemic. So if you
Yeah.
think about it, we kind of have to pivot again.
Yes.
We
Yes.
have to pivot again, and
Yeah.
and so I think the journey never ends. Like it doesn't end yet. We're not out of the woods yet. We had a great start. We got a really great boost.
Yeah.
But the story hasn't ended yet. We're just going into another chapter.
Well, yeah. And I think that what's interesting to me is you came up with an idea based on a need. You realized that wasn't quite the idea, that this other thing was what people needed right now. And then the pandemic made it really clear that was the need that people had. So no matter how
Right.
big a group you're meeting with, you can meet in Remo. It's not dependent on size. You can do it for large conferences, but you can do it for small meetings, right? So
Correct.
the thing that is curious to me is when you envision the future for you as an entrepreneur, because you're the one that developed this, right? And so what I know about the entrepreneurial mindset is that we are always wanting to do the next new thing. So when you think about
Mm.
the future for you, what do you envision? Like in your world, what would you like that to be like? What would you like to experience, see, or grow in yourself as an entrepreneur? What's fascinating
Um,
to you right now?
I mean, there's a few. Okay, so there's two things. I mean, from a experiential standpoint, I can share with that. Like, I think VR is definitely a future. I think it is a future that we eventually get to. But I think there's a lot of things about the human condition that we're not communicating yet. I mean,
Yeah.
um, there's um, there's a ratio like that says 60% of communication is nonverbal. It's
Yes.
all body language. And right now, video doesn't really do a good job with that. Like I can see your head nod, I can
Yeah.
see like your chest upwards, but I don't really feel Patty you here,
That's
and I'm
right.
absorbing all those body language signals. I think I'm really interested in that. I'm passionate
Yeah.
about that. Like
Yeah.
my goal is because by the way, if you're in VR, you have the same problems.
Yes.
But if you think about it in VR, if you created a 3D avatar, the challenge with 3D avatar is if you're going to give me something 3D and you're trying to trick me and it's trying to be photorealistic, my
Yes.
immediate expectation
Yes.
is that you better be really, really real.
Yes.
Anything that's small, that's just a little bit off, it
Yeah.
breaks the illusion. It breaks
Yes.
the illusion.
Yes.
If those
Yes.
micro gestures of your face
Yeah.
are a little bit odd, or like they don't move in a natural way, humans
Yeah.
pick up on that. And
Yeah.
it immediately just shifts your head and says, this is not real. This
Well,
is
and you're
not,
guarded. That's what's happening, is that you become, it triggers
I'm
that
not
part of your
convinced.
amygdala. You're not going to engage in a way, right?
And so for me, video is still the best way. Number one, because it's actually see the person's face.
Yeah.
And number two is like, I think there's a lot of things that can be done through video, through 2D, that uh,
Yeah.
is easy, that can't be done.
Yeah.
And so that's technology, that's the stuff that I'm interested in. From a personal standpoint, like for me, I think it's continuing to like innovate and take risks, and be able to continue to find great things that really kind of flow and just and do really well, um, and just tackle like different industry verticals, and just
Yes.
finding the right people to help do that. Like for me, it's a lot about you know, having great conversations with people, finding people who have similar vision and share the vision that I have,
Yes.
and getting these people together to then go tackle these other use cases, these other things. That to me is exciting. That to me
Yeah.
is like
Yeah.
Remo is not just for universities or professional associations or corporates. Like you can go into other areas as well. That's kind of like,
Yeah.
wow,
Real
we're really
world
thinking a
problems.
lot.
Yeah. And big
Yeah,
thinking and art projects and collaboration of any kind, right? Well, I love
right.
that. And so when you are thinking about, you know, or want to give advice to anybody who's listening who might want to, who might feel like, oh, I'm caught in an entrepreneurial trap right now and I need to pivot out of it. What advice would you give them?
Yeah, I mean the roller coaster is real, and I would say you have to be really open-minded in thinking different ways, that whatever you're doing,
Yeah.
it's could be someone else or something can find use for it. And set yourself a timeline. Like give yourself a certain amount of time to discover enough. Um, and if you cannot find that within that time frame, then it might be better to then consider something else. There's nothing wrong with giving up on something as long as you gave it enough time. Really, it's more of like, what did you learn? So you can apply it again on the next thing. And you just keep trying. Sometimes you just have to try several times. Like it's like, you know, playing the guitar. You know, you would try to play the guitar in one song the whole
Yes.
way through. The first time you play the guitar that one song, you're not going to be able to play it the whole way through. You're going to
Yeah.
fail several times playing through that song. You just got to
Yeah.
do it several times until you can play through the whole song. So you gotta go through it several, you know, failures in some sense. So failure should be expected.
Yes.
Success is
Yes.
unexpected. It's like, oh wow, look, I figured it out. Like, oh, this is nice. Like that is what it
I
should
love that.
it should be more of. Like be optimistic, but also have some realism as well.
I love that. And I think that that to me is really what your whole company is about. And it's one of the things in our session when we had, that's what you kept saying to people. You have to be willing to fail. You have to be willing to make mistakes in order to grow and change and to find the right solution. And so that is fantastic advice. All right. Is there anything else that you want to tell us about Remo or you before we let people go on to explore the platform themselves? Anything else?
Yeah. Yeah, come come to remote.co. We've got many ways you can try the platform. We have an open space. We have demo. We have a demo you can give. You can contact any of us. There's multiple ways. The best way is to go to a Remo event. That is the best way to experience Remo, and you will immediately feel it and understand what it's about. I could sell to you and share with you as many times as I want, as many times as you or I want. It doesn't matter. You go into an event, and you'll feel it. You'll
Yeah.
automatically get it. So yeah.
It's so true. I mean, that's how I fell in love with Remo is I went in there to an event that was happening and I was like, oh my God, this is exactly what I need. This is exactly what I want to be using so that I can have a true experience with people that feels like they're sitting right next to me and I can move around. and meet other people in a conference space. It's beautiful. I love it. I love what you can build in it. And I can't wait to see what else you come up with because it's always
Sure.
amazing. Well, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for taking time with us today. All right, everybody,
You,
you know the
Patty.
drill. If you'd go down there, be sure to look in the show notes for how you can connect with Hoyin and Remo. Go there right away. Check it out. And thank you so much. Until next time, up your creative genius.